Welcome, everybody. We have such a special guest today. I'm very honored to have Debbie Solaris. For those ones who haven't met her yet, today is a great opportunity to meet an amazing person with a lot of knowledge. And she's sharing her time today to um, come and explain what she does and also how this can help you as well. So Debbie Solaris is a ET contactee. How many ET contactees have you met? And a galactic historian, interdimensional traveler, Galactic Akashic Records guide, and a Starseed Institute based in Colorado. So welcome, Debbie. Thank you for be and give your wisdom and share your wisdom with this like-minded community. So
Amazing.
for those ones who haven't met you yet, can you please explain a little bit what about yourself and how is a little bit about this galactic, how your path went to the Galactic Historian and ET contactees? If you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. So, for those of you that don't know me, especially for people that I guess don't watch Gaia, because I think everybody that watches Gaia probably knows me by now. But anyway, I am a galactic historian first and foremost. That's what I guess the title I most attached to. But I'm also an Akashic channeler. I've done Akashic readings for groups and for individual people for about I would say 12 years now. And I wasn't always on this journey. So this wasn't like, it wasn't like some people that, they were spiritual since they were a child and, they kind of been down this spiritual path for, decades. For me, it was, quite immediate, quite a kind of a dramatic change, which I'll explain in a minute, how that all worked out. But I've done a multitude of Akashic readings, and I get galactic historical downloads quite a bit from the Akashic records. So that's how I have been able to access information about galactic history and different star races and star lineages and how that connects to planet Earth and how that connects to us, as light workers and star seeds, since I think Dolores Cannon was the first one that kind of delved down the path of star seeds. She wrote that book, The Three Waves of Volunteers
Yes.
to Earth, so I think she was the first one that kind of laid out the foundation for what star seeds are all about. And so we have a lot to be thankful for her. I consider her like one of my mentors or somebody I can look up to, even though I never personally have met her or worked with her. But the other person I think that was a forerunner for this information was Edgar Casey,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
yeah, Edgar Casey was downloading information from the Akashic records long before even people even knew what they were, so he was considered one of the foremost psychics of the last century. And then there's Linda Howe, So Linda Howe, I consider her to be the mother of modern Akashic reading. She's taught a lot of people how to access the records, and she has a very methodical way of doing that. But getting back to how I got started on all
Yeah.
of this, yeah. So how did I get started? Why am I doing this? Well, it was never my intention, honestly. I was very much a very 3D person. I was born to a military family.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we were not interested in anything that was metaphysical at all, so that was not ever a conversation at the dinner table. And I was raised Catholic just like you,
Yeah.
so Catholics have very preconceived ideas about reincarnation. They don't believe in it. They think you just have this one life and you better do good in this life because if you don't, you're going to go to hell,
Yeah.
so so that's kind of scary, It's like, okay, I guess I can't mess up, or if I do, I better do some penance for that, or I'm going to be put in purgatory for a while,
Yeah. Also,
so yeah, go ahead.
in that regards, it's like I remember when I was at school, they were saying why God is going to recycle souls. That He can make all the souls. So it's
Yeah.
all these misconceptions, as you say. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions in in the Christian faith, but so I was brought up with those beliefs, and I never really, I don't know, I think there was times I questioned it, like it didn't seem like it was right, like even as a kid, I was just like, yeah, I didn't understand the whole Adam and Eve story, or it was just like some things didn't quite make sense, but you're just trying to, fit in and trying to grow up and, become an adult and do the adult thing, So I personally, just didn't really think that much about metaphysical topics. Not until I started dating my now husband. So, when I first started dating him, this was like in the early 2000s. I noticed, pretty soon after we started dating that he really loved stories about the paranormal. Like he really liked, the stories about UFOs, about Sasquatch, about ghosts, about unexplained events. And I thought, what the heck is he reading about? I was like, what is this stuff, And especially the ET stuff, I couldn't even go on board with that. I was just like, I just can't wrap my mind around this. There's got to be, an explanation, so I just didn't really, I was very skeptical, even though, he was really more into it than I was, at least in the beginning. And then about in 2012, so in 2012, I think my consciousness was starting to expand a little bit because people were talking about the Mayan calendar ending, and there was, a lot of these spiritual concepts were starting to come to the forefront. And I think that was an awakening year for a lot of people. I honestly think that was a pivotal year for awakening along with 2020, and
Hmm.
maybe, certain periods even before that, like the harmonic convergence and 1987, so there were certain years where I think a lot of people were awakening, and so I was starting to question things around 2012. I didn't like the direction that I saw pretty much our whole society was moving towards. Just there's just a lot of suffering on this planet, and it's unnecessary. And you would think by now, being in the 21st century, that we would be more evolved, by now. And so I was questioning a lot of things, and I just felt like, gosh, Earth, we need a lot of help. We need some
Hmm.
help. I mean, we need like divine help because we're not getting it here on Earth, So one night I couldn't sleep. I had a kind of a restless night, and I sent out this prayer to the universe. So I prayed to the universe that we could get some divine assistance for the planet because people were suffering, animals were suffering, the environment was suffering, planet Earth was suffering, and we just need help, I mean, and I was sending this prayer out to Jesus, Mother Mary, ascended masters, angels,
Oh,
and then
good.
for some reason I said galactic brothers and sisters. I was just
Oh,
like,
wow.
okay, galactic brothers and sisters. Okay. So I said this prayer, and then I was very earnest and sincere about it, So and then I forgot about it, So the next day, went back to work, So I was still working my 3D job at the time, and then I forgot about it, So I just figured it was going to be one of those prayers, that nothing's going to come out of it, Um, so about 2 weeks after I said that prayer, I went to sleep. It was nighttime. I went to sleep as normal. And when I came to back to consciousness, I was in a different reality. So I was most likely having an out of body experience. But when I was looking around, it did look like I was on board an extraterrestrial starship.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it definitely looked like a star, like a craft,
Hmm.
and uh, I could tell that there was something different about it because when you watch like YouTube or maybe even like the Hollywood movies or the shows like Star Trek and Star Wars and all these sci-fi movies that we see all the time, the ships always look really metallic. They always look like they've been constructed by humans. This ship didn't look like that. I mean, you could tell it was some sort of a craft, but it looked like it was comprised of light and plasma material. I mean, it was
Mm.
very organic and it kind of shifted and changed as needed. And I noticed that the ship was directing me towards a space. And so I was following it along, and it led me to a large kind of conference, or they called it the orientation room, but it was like a large room, and there was this big holographic sphere in the middle of the room, and there was 4 or 5 extraterrestrial beings waiting for me in this room. And these beings were unlike any beings I've ever even heard described, so I could tell they were extraterrestrial. I mean, it was pretty obvious, but I knew they weren't gray aliens. I knew they weren't tall whites. They weren't reptilians. I mean, it was just like, well, what are these beings? They kind of had a humanoid look somewhat, but they were very alien-esque, and they had larger heads, larger eyes, small bodies, like very, very slender bodies. And at first glance, you might think, "Oh, that sounds like a gray alien," but they did not look like gray aliens. They had a very kindly look to their face. Their eyes had pupils and irises. And it was hard to look at them, like just looking at them directly. Their auras were so bright, and they had so many beautiful colors in their auras that I couldn't really make them out at first. And then as I looked at them more, I was like, okay, now I'm starting to see what they kind of look like. And they had very refined facial features. I mean, they looked very kind. They looked like kind beings. And just the feeling I got from them was very, loving. It's just not scary, not like, oh gosh, what are these beings? I just felt very welcomed, by them. And so so a lot of people will ask me, well, were you scared? And I said, no, I
Yeah,
wasn't scared at
I
all.
was about to ask you that. No.
Yeah, no, I wasn't scared. I was just like, what is this? I want to figure out what's going on, so I think I was just too busy just trying to figure things out to be scared. But um, I remember trying to formulate questions in my head to ask these beings. And I kept thinking to myself, do they even understand English? Can I ask them a question in English? And even before I would finish the question in my head, they were answering my questions.
Oh,
So they were
wow.
obviously telepathically connecting with me. And so, of course, I asked them, who are you? Where am I? What is this? Why am I here?
Yeah.
Um, and these beings told me they were Arcturians from the star
Oh,
system Arcturus. Okay, so they were Arcturians, and they told me where their ship was located. So they said, yes, you're on board a starship. And it's located in this solar system, in your solar system. It's between the asteroid belt. We're located between the asteroid belt and Jupiter. So I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So kind of far, but not that far,
that far. Yeah.
not too bad. And I asked them, why me? Like I'm nobody special, why are you bringing me up here? And they said, well, we heard your prayer. We felt
Oh,
like I said, wow, really? You heard my prayer? And they said, yeah, we were very impressed by your prayer. And we felt like it was time for you to know the truth. And I said, okay, so what's the truth? And they told me that I was actually one of them, that I was a soul
Arcturian.
that had chosen to incarnate on Earth to fulfill a mission, a big mission actually, but that I had forgotten my mission, and they said that, they don't blame me for that because it's hard to remember on planet Earth. They say when you go through the third dimensional veil, it's like all your memories are wiped, so
And
it's very,
There's
What's
a
that?
reason for that, for the memories to be wiped.
It's because of the density of
Oh,
the
the
third
density.
dimension. Yeah, it's very dense. So our memories just get wiped. So that's why I think a lot of us, like if when we're existing in the higher dimensional realms, this is something I noticed through working with the Akashic Records. So even though you might be like a higher dimensional being, and this might be your, I don't know, 1,000th and 10th, incarnation, you're going to remember all your past lives in the higher realms. I mean, because you're closer to source, you're in the higher dimensions. But when you incarnate on earth, we go through this veil of forgetfulness. So we just kind of we incarnate here. And I think as souls, we kind of anticipate this. So I think that's why sometimes as souls, this might be predestined, but we might set up opportunities for us to start remembering, so we might run into somebody, or we might listen to something, or maybe we might see something that might, jog an old soul memory. So I truly believe this, um, but yeah, normally we don't remember anything when we're here on Earth. So it takes us half a lifetime to try to figure out who we truly are and why we're here, and that's what the Arcturians are trying to explain to me. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I was asking them a lot of questions about why are things so messed up on planet Earth? Why is Earth so bad? It's just like really bad. And they said it's because it's part of an experiment to be in the lower dimensional realms, kind of like playing a video game where we're all kind of having create an avatar, we're all playing our part. And they say that the third dimension is an illusion, that it's not real. And I
Okay.
said, oh, wow, okay. And in a way, I didn't quite understand it. But
Hmm.
now looking back on that, it makes sense to me because when you're in those higher realms, like when I was on board that ship, everything was hyper real. I mean, it was like everything was crystal clear, sharp, details were sharp, colors were brilliant. You could see auras around things. I mean, it was hyper real. So then when you're in the third dimension, it kind of feels hazy to me
Mm.
sometimes. Like sometimes you're going around, you're like, wow, things look kind of hazy and kind of dull, compared to, these higher realms. So at first I didn't quite understand them. They told me this like several times, like this is an illusion. And I was like, what do you mean? I said, everything, I mean, I can touch my furniture, I can touch things, I mean, things seem kind of real, but according to them, it was an illusion. And they had me on board the ship for a while. It actually felt like I was there for like weeks or months because they kind of showed me around, they showed me different parts of the ship. And then they
And
cut me loose and they said, hey, you can explore on your own. And I was like, okay, like
what was your form, or do you didn't see your form inside the
I
ship?
think I looked like myself. I looked like my
Okay.
human self.
Hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that, and it's like, I think I just looked, because when I looked at my hands, and I mean, obviously there wasn't a mirror around, but I think I just totally looked like myself. I was probably still in my pajamas. I don't know, but I
So,
mean, I was like looking at myself. I was like, gosh, I mean, I didn't look any different, So, um,
and
so I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
no, what you're saying is amazing because in as you know, I do past life regressions and I receive
Yeah.
past life regressions myself. And exactly what you mentioning about this spaceship that is organic, that is like a melting silver or something, and you are
Yeah.
inside of that. So it's interesting that you say about the 2012 was your awakening, because
Hmm.
I wrote a book about this called The Secret Power of a Mayan Princess, and I'm
Hmm.
explaining in a past it's a past life regression, and
Hmm.
exactly what you're saying from the point of view of a Mayan princess, how she
Hmm.
was contacting um, beings in this
Hmm.
spaceship that looks exactly what you're saying.
Hmm.
But if you can add a little bit, what do you think? I know that 2012, 2020 were some situations, but that shift the earth. But what do you think was exactly the Mayans trying to say that is going to happen in 2012? Because there are so many, misinformation out there of what they were
Oh
trying
yeah,
to
totally.
say. So from the information that you've been getting what the Mayans were saying, and the other question that is related is, in my past life regression, in
Mhm.
that is about my book, there's not. To be honest, I don't know who were the beings. I know that there
Mm,
were perhaps blue beings,
mm,
blue avians, and also the main contactee that I have with was this blonde lady,
mm,
but the beauty was beyond physical, like, but
mm.
looks human. But
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
so I'm not. Yeah, and the story is that they moved the Mayans to another planet. So I don't know if you
Yeah,
can explain with your historian information and Galactic about a little bit more about what
just
did
the
they say
connection
to you.
about between the extraterrestrials and Mayans. So here's the thing with the Mayan culture is that I do think that a lot of them have a connection with the Pleiades. There's actually a star system in the Pleiades called Maya, which is probably where they got their name from.
Okay.
So it's Maia is the name is the star system, but Mayans isn't too far off, from that. And then so I do believe that a lot of the Mayans had a direct connection with Maya and Merope, which are two star systems in the Pleiades. Now, I do think in the early days of the Mayan culture or the civilization, they probably had extraterrestrial visits quite a bit, because they talk about Quetzalcoatl and all these gods that were, they kind of had beautiful looks, they were tall and they had advanced technologies, so they were probably likely interacting with extraterrestrial beings.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably your Mayan princess was probably communicating with these beings because she probably knows them, she
Mm-hmm.
probably sees them all the time. Um, so these being so if you go to places like Chichen Itza, which my husband and I went to Chichen Itza 2 years ago, and I'm actually going to a conference this year located at Chichen Itza
Um,
later this year. So that's pretty exciting.
that's good.
Yeah, so a lot of their temples, I mean, this is kind of like almost throughout it, almost I would say ubiquitous with the Central America and also some parts of South America. Pretty much all of their temples are aligned with the Pleiades
Mm-hmm.
or Venus.
Okay.
So yeah, Venus, so they're all aligned with the Pleiades. Like I think they said that Machu Picchu, for instance, which is the Inca culture,
Mm-hmm.
like all of their temples are aligned with all the different stars of the Pleiades, which I think there's at least seven that are pretty well known, but I think there's more stars than that in the Pleiades asterism. But I do think they also had influences from Sirius. I do think there was quite a few Syrian beings that were probably visiting the Mayans, and so maybe some of the blue skin beings were from Sirius. The blonde lady
Okay.
was probably most likely Pleiadian.
Lady.
And uh, and I don't know, there might have been some Andromedan influence. I don't know, but Andromedans are also blue skinned. But
Mm-hmm.
um, or maybe even Vega beings, so there might have been a higher dimensional Pleiadians, that were interacting with the Mayans. And I
Yes.
do agree with you. So I think your book was correct that I do believe that the Mayans didn't get assimilated into the Spanish culture after the Spaniards took over their country or their area. I do believe they ascended. They went to another location. So,
Mm,
you
thank
know, so
you.
yeah, so I do agree with you with that I think a lot of these higher dimensional civilizations that were highly spiritual, such as the Lemurians or, the Etruscans or
Mm-hmm.
or the Mayans or the Inca, I don't think they got assimilated. I think they actually ascended, you know.
Ascended. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think
That's
that's what happened to the Mayans. That's why so many of them just disappeared.
disappear.
Yeah. And so probably some of them did intermix and married with the, Spanish. And,
Mm,
that's why we see a lot of genetic mixing, in Central America, um, but for the most part, I would say there's a really heavy Venusian and Pleiadian influence on their culture. It's kind of interesting that they got into the whole kind of sacrificing humans thing. I
mm.
never could quite wrap my mind around that. I don't understand the whole purpose of it unless they got, infiltrated by maybe some reptilians, so there was,
Grace.
yeah, so I think that might have been happening, um, but yeah, for the most part, they were originally developed to be, a very high dimensional, very highly spiritual, civilization. And they kind of maintained that connection, I think, for the most
Yeah.
part. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. In my book, the Grace were infiltrated. The
Hmm.
Grace. But I interrupt you. So after
No,
that,
no, you're fine.
after that contactee that you were in the spaceship and you felt that you were weeks there and they were showing you what happened next. What happened when you wake up? Like when you wake up back
Yeah,
to
yeah, that's it. So, so you were talking about interacting with Pleiadians, and they just look so amazing when you see them, So as I was wandering the ship, I'll now wrap it up here pretty quickly. But as I was wandering the ship, I ended up in this large centermost point of the ship, kind of like a big atrium. It was several stories high. There was hundreds of beings on board the ship, and not all of them were Arcturians. They had different species of beings, and you could tell they weren't from Earth. And there was these light shafts that would transport these beings from one side to the other. So there was light shafts, kind of looked like rainbows. And I wanted to go on one of them, and I kept getting thrown off. And so a Pleiadian man kind of caught me and he told me telepathically, you're doing it wrong. You're not doing it correctly. You need to set an intention where you want to go first, then step on the light
oh
shaft, and then it'll take you. And when you look at a Pleiadian being, like when you really see one, it's like your breath just leaves your body because they're so amazingly beautiful that I mean, their skin glows, their eyes glow, their hair glows. They just have this beautiful energy. They're very attractive beings, so, they have, I would say their eyes are slightly larger than humans, not a whole lot larger. I mean, for the most part, they look humanoid, but you can tell just looking at them that they're not from Earth. You're never going to
yeah,
see anybody from Earth that look like that. And I've
yeah.
encountered Pleiadians since, and I was just like, wow, they're pretty amazing looking people.
And
Yeah, I
the energy.
and the energy, yeah, it's the energy too, so it's not just the physical looks, it's the frequency. and
Mhm.
and so that they're not Earth humans. So this Pleiadian man was trying to help me, and then I did step on the light shaft because I finally gave it an intention, and it was transporting me through the air in the ship, and then the next thing I knew, I woke up and I was in my bed. So I was
Yeah.
I was sad. Yeah, I was like, darn it, I wanted to stay.
Would it
And
be
then
heavy? Yeah.
yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm back here. And I was so depressed for months after that. I was crying every day. I wanted to go back to the ship. I missed my new friends on the ship. I was crying and and I finally got over it, but it was just when you go from like having an extraordinary experience like that, and then you go back to the 3D, it's hard. It's really, I think a lot of NDEers, like people that go through
Yeah.
NDEs, have a very similar experience, where they feel like, oh, I was exposed to higher dimensions and now I'm back in 3D and I don't want to deal with this heavy energy or this density. What I did notice after I had those experiences, so I had two very similar experiences, one in May, that was the one I just described, and then I had a second shorter experience in December of that same year. And getting back to 2012, I think a lot of people were thinking that the Mayans were talking about the end of the world,
Hmm.
which was not the case. I think they were just talking about the end of a time period. So
Hmm.
we're ending the old time period and starting the new. And and I do think that was the whole purpose behind the ending of the Mayan calendar. So we're moving from the Piscean age to the age of Aquarius, which is going to be the new golden age. So there was the harbinger of a new age, which I think that was the whole purpose. But a lot of people misinterpreted it and said, "Oh, it's going to be the end of the world," and think, "Well, I guess it's going to be at the end of the old world." Because there was a lot of changes since 2012.
A
I
lot,
mean,
and very fast, very fast changes, I guess.
yeah, very, very rapid changes, more so than what we've seen in previous decades. So there was something to the ending of an old age. But getting back to my story, I was
Hmm.
just I noticed that I had changed, that I wasn't the same person. Um, I knew I went through an extraordinary experience. I knew that something extraordinary happened to me, and I was never going to be the same. I just knew that. And then I noticed that I was seeing UFOs all the time. I was
Oh,
interacting with extraterrestrial beings. And I mean, where I had encounters with them in real time, so that's a whole
oh,
other story.
wow. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so it was like that was a whole other story, but I was seeing UFOs and telepathically communicating with UFOs, and then was interdimensionally traveling. I was all of a sudden able to remote view and see things in other star systems. And I was getting massive information, like I was getting downloads of information every night about
Oh,
different
wow.
galactic wars, different galactic events, about star systems. Like all of a sudden I knew all these star systems. I was like, where am I learning this stuff? Where am I getting this information? And at first I thought I was going crazy. So I was like, I need to figure this out. Maybe I'm not, I don't know, maybe I am going crazy. I don't know. Because a lot of this information I didn't know before.
Of
So I didn't
course,
know
yeah.
the Lyran Wars, or I didn't know about Orion or the Pleiades. So I started doing a lot of research. So I was taking a lot of spiritual classes. I was reading a lot of books, a lot,
Hmm.
a lot of them in my back here. They can see in my office here. So this is my actual office. So
Yeah.
so I was reading a lot of books, and I was starting to realize, oh, some of these books are kind of collaborating my downloads,
Hmm.
like Dolores Cannon, for instance. She was collaborating a lot of information, and Alex Collier and Edgar Casey
Hmm.
and then Lissa Royale Holt, so there was some information already out there that we're talking about similar things that I was seeing. And then around 2014, I started taking Reiki classes locally here in my hometown in Colorado. And I pretty much I was talking to my Reiki teacher. She was quite knowledgeable. I mean, she was a former university professor. So I was like, I could probably tell her some things. So I asked her about my downloads. I said, I get these downloads and I'm just seeing a lot of stuff. And she says, well, it sounds like you're getting information from the Akashic Records. And I said, wow,
Oh.
wow, okay. So I'd never heard of the Akashic Records at that
Hmm.
point. And I was asking her about it. And then she says, well, I do teach classes on how to access the records and read them. And I said, really? Sounds like I
Oh.
need to take that class. So I took level one with her. She was only like 5 minutes from my house. I mean, her
Meant to
studio,
be.
it was like meant to be, right? It's
Yeah.
like, you couldn't set it up even better, than that. So I started taking classes and I noticed that I was pretty good, like I was getting, I was accessing the records pretty easily. And I was probably always excuse me, can't even talk today, accessing them before, but it was kind of more random.
Hmm.
Now it was kind of like I had a process so I could,
Okay.
connect with them at will. And at the time I thought, oh yeah, I'm pretty good at this. I can do readings and, make a little extra money because I was still working my 3D, day job, at this
Hmm.
time. Um, so I started off doing Akashic readings just as a hobby, kind of
Hmm.
like, a side gig, like, oh, I can make a little extra money and, you know, help some people out,
Yeah.
um, so then one thing led to another. So I got asked to present with the Denver near-death experiencer group, so they had like a panel of ET contactees and they asked me to be a part of that. And that's when I first went public with my story. So this was in
Okay.
2000. So before that, I didn't tell anybody except my
Hmm.
husband and maybe two friends, but my family didn't even know. So that's when I first went public. And then through that presentation, I guess people were really impressed. So they asked me to do a presentation on galactic star races and history at the University of Colorado. And I thought, wow, I mean, that was amazing. Like the University of Colorado's in Boulder. It's like a very prominent
Big one.
university. Yeah, it's very, very well known, um, so then people locally started getting to know me and, was doing more readings. I was getting invited to do more presentations. And then I started doing readings for people at Gaia, so I start to meet people at Gaia because Gaia is located in Boulder,
Big
just south.
one.
Yeah. So I started to get to know those folks and then they were just like, wow, we got to get you on the show, and I was
Ah,
like, and
one.
it took a while. It wasn't like immediate, like I didn't ask to be on the show until 2020, so
Okay.
so it wasn't like, I was doing readings and then it just happened automatically. It was, it took a while, but so people get discouraged because they want to be a guest on Gaia. And I tell them all the time, I live in Colorado and it was hard. And I know the people that work there. And it was hard for me to get on a show, so it doesn't happen, automatically. I think there's a lot of, factors in play, but that's when people really started to get to know who I was, after the Gaia interviews. And I've done about, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 interviews now with them. So I think people, probably a lot of people know me from the Gaia, shows, but I've been on a lot of podcasts. I just came back from not Los Angeles, Las Vegas, doing a podcast, a big podcast. So I
What?
do a lot of podcasts, but it's because I'm a devoted to my mission,
Yeah.
So
And
so
I
I'm sorry,
feel
go ahead.
that every time that you speak, doesn't matter in the podcast or so many programs on Gaia, which I watch, I think almost all in Gaia, and I follow
Yeah.
you always learn something new. Like you
Mm,
continue sharing the new downloads and the new information. And it's amazing because to be honest, I try to not to, because there's a time of discernment right now. There are so many
yeah, yeah,
people that they say that they contact, which we don't know is the real or is the ego. Yeah.
yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah.
so I trust your information and I
Thank
resonate with your you know energy as well.
you. Mhm.
And so in that regards, with all these new beings that you contact, that they contact you directly or is through the Akashic records? I mean, you said that you contact, for example, the Lyrans. They come and contact you directly and give you some information, or the Anunnakis, or how you, because it must be a lot for your brain. I
Yeah,
mean, for the
and
spirit,
that's
perhaps
why I'm
it's
tired
not,
all the time.
but
That's why
for
I'm
the,
tired all the time, girl.
yeah,
That's
for
why.
the brain, it's like a lot of energy coming through different, and how you condense and how you easy explain it to people. So
Yeah.
how you do that process?
Um, a lot of it is through the records, but there's times when I meditate and I'll connect with certain beings,
Okay.
so um So I was very resistant to meditation at first, and then, my guides sent me on this journey to learn to meditate with the Zen Buddhist monks, so that was a whole other story. But yeah, I have interesting guides. Yeah, they're fun sometimes. Sometimes they're hard taskmasters, uh, but I do meditate every day, and a lot of it is it's a combination of astral traveling, also maybe intentional through doing Akashic Records readings, maybe through meditation, and then also sometimes through remote viewing,
Okay.
so there's a number of ways I connect with these beings. And sometimes it's just like a download, like I get a
Mhm.
download of information. Like for instance, I was real curious one time um, about a race of beings called the Tausedians, because you don't hear about them a lot.
Yeah.
But I got this download from that one of my friends was connected with that star system, so I wanted to find out more about it. And so I intentionally did a remote viewing, and I was able to see a planet that revolved around their star system and some of the beings that were on the planet. And what was cool about that experience was that they knew I was looking in on them, like they picked up my energy, and they knew I was connected with Arcturus. Because I kept telling them I
Mm.
was from Earth, and they said, "No, you're not from Earth."
Oh.
So and they had humanoid beings, but they also had like bear-like beings that were kind of like they stood on their two feet. They were kind of upright, but they looked like Wookiees, I guess, like from Star Wars.
Oh, it's
But
so cute.
yeah, so it's so cute, and it was just, and they were all pilots, and they were all talking about some of their missions, and it was really cool to kind of get a glimpse of their culture, just through remote viewing. And so I just had an appreciation for them ever since. And there's a lot of races like that I connect with, like periodically. Like I'll say, "Oh, I don't know about this race. Let me go check it out." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." For instance, Spiccans were Spica, which is a star system in the Virgo constellation. I had a download about them because I didn't know that, about Spiccans, but it kept coming
I-
up. So I was just like, I got to find out about these Spica people. And Spica was really kind of interesting. They were descendants of Lyran refugees. So there's a lot of feline beings in
Okay.
Spica, so a lot of felines, but also some humanoid looking beings, but very, very high dimensional. Like they're not even like in physical form anymore. They're super high dimensional beings. And I don't often run across starseeds that are connected with Spica. But that's an example of a couple of races that a lot of people don't know about,
Yeah, I
that
never heard about them.
yeah, so I think the races that we hear about a lot, like the Pleiadians and the Syrians and the Arcturians, those are the races that had probably more of a direct influence on planet Earth, on the development of planet Earth. But some of these other races might have had some influence, but very little,
Okay.
so we don't see as many star seeds, coming from these locations. But there's probably tens of thousands of beings
Okay.
in our galaxy alone. There's not just a handful,
And
and
what about the councils and then what they doing now, if you know, if you want to share
oh yeah, oh
about this
absolutely.
period, like in this transition period that we're going right now,
Hmm.
and the different councils as well, because the councils come often in the hypnosis.
Yeah.
So I would like your opinion about that.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, the councils are amazing. So there's quite a few different councils, and I
Mm,
think there's certain names for councils that I think they might be describing the same council, but they just have different names. So um, so I know there's like the major galactic councils that are based in Galactic Center. So Galactic Center is located between uh, Scorpio, the constellations of Scorpio and Sagittarius. So I think the exact location is 28 degrees Sagittarius. So that's where a lot of these really high dimensional councils are located. There's also some very high dimensional councils that are located in the Orion Nebula. So these are the Orion Nebula ones are super high dimensional. I mean, they're like close to God. I mean, these are beings
Wow.
that are like one step below source. So not a lot of people think Orion Nebula and Orion constellation are the same thing, and they're not. They're, two totally different locations. Same with Andromeda Galaxy and Andromeda constellation, two
Hmm.
different locations. But the reason why they call it Orion Nebula is because from our vantage point here on Earth, we see it in the Orion constellation, but it's actually
Okay.
much further out. So there's a lot of different councils. The Pleiadians have their councils, Arcturians have their councils. So each
Okay.
race also has their councils, and then the Galactic Federation has their councils. So it's kind of hard to tell, like when somebody talks about a council, what council are they talking
Yeah.
about? It's like, I mean, because there's a lot of them out there.
Okay.
So a lot of times, if I'm looking at the Akashic records like you do when you do your sessions, I'm like, what councils are you connecting with? Because it could be a lot of different ones. There's even the Council of the Andromeda Council.
Okay.
So the Andromeda Council, that's kind of like the UN of the galaxy. So they have representatives from many different star systems. So it's not just Andromedans, but they do have Andromedan representatives, but they have also representatives from the Pleiades or representatives from Arcturus, so it's it's kind of like the UN, here on
Okay.
Earth. But then you have these high dimensional councils that are comprised of light beings, that are totally like Elohim beings or angelic beings, so there's a multitude of councils. As far as the councils that are probably most directly involved with Earth, it's probably mostly the Galactic Federation.
Okay.
So I do think the Galactic Federation are probably trying to do some things behind the scenes to
Hmm.
assist us on planet Earth, but they can't do anything quite directly. So they can't really interfere with our free will.
Yeah.
But we can ask them for assistance and they're willing to help us. They will help us, but it may not be necessarily be like directly helping us. They're kind of more like indirectly helping us, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah,
So in
so
this transition that we're going as a humanity,
mhm.
basically they are somehow holding us, but without intervening in this, in everything, in this breakthrough that planet Earth is going. Is something like that,
I would
or
yeah, I would say they're kind of helping behind the scenes,
okay,
but for instance, I know they've dismantled quite a few of the nuclear weapons on this
okay,
planet. They actually, I think, destroyed some of the underground bases where there was a lot of human trafficking and
okay,
kind of these reptilian bases that were under what they call the dumbs, they've dismantled some of those. Um, they're helping behind the scenes, but they can't directly like have an influence on our elections or for
yes,
or put somebody in a place of power. They would never do that anyway, but they are trying to help minimize some of the damage that's been caused on this planet.
and do
So
you
that's
think will that's good, that's good, and do you
yeah.
think it's going to be the point that we're going to a disclosure worldwide that actually exists and they are around us and we can contact them like that big, or is still behind the scenes, or the humans are not prepared yet?
I do think we're going to have contact. So I do believe we're going to have extraterrestrial contact in our lifetime. And I do think it's right around the corner. I do believe that maybe by the end of this decade, so we're fastly approaching the end of this decade. I mean, very,
Hmm.
very quickly. So I would say probably between 2028 and 2032,
Hmm.
we're going to have extraterrestrial contact where everybody knows. I mean, where there's no, hidden agendas, no government telling us it's just a weather balloon, none of that.
Okay.
So so we're all going to know. At that point, there's going to be, I think, massive disclosure. I think there could be no um, there's no going back after that point, I
Yeah.
mean, because everybody's going to know that, oh yeah, we were contacted by aliens. There might be some scare events, where, maybe the government will, they call it Project Blue Beam, where the government might try to pretend that there's an
Pretend.
alien invasion, I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I do know that there will be an actual contact. People always ask me what species of beings, and I always say, well, honestly, I don't think we're quite ready for Pleiadians yet. I think it'll be like some sort of race that's located close to us, like Alpha Centaurians or Venusians, and
Mhm.
they're kind of most like humans, maybe, so we're not going to get too freaked out, when these beings visit us, because they're going to look kind of like us, but um, so I do think it's probably most likely going to be Alpha Centaurians because they're located only 3.7 light years from Earth. They're our closest neighbors, besides the Venusians, that are just so I do think there'll be some connections, but and then eventually we'll start, as we start getting used to being, as a collective, like, okay, yeah, extraterrestrials exist. We're starting to get exposed to a lot of their ideas and a lot of their technology, so it's going to be massive change with technology at this point. Um, then we're going to start interacting with Pleiadians and Sirians and
Mhm.
Arcturians and that. But I think it's going to be a process. So I don't think it's going to be like happening all overnight. I think it's going to definitely happen over a number of years. But yeah, I keep seeing in the records that it's usually that period. That's the period I keep seeing, like between 2028 and 2032. So it's a 4-year period, or a 5-year period. That timeline can always change, So I know this is probably the case with hypnotherapy too. But when you see the future, it's always a probability
Yeah.
because we can always change our futures. So
Hmm.
nothing is so predetermined that it's going to happen no matter what, I mean, um, a lot of the things that were predicted by Nostradamus, back in the 1500s or the 1400s when he was doing his predictions, probably was true for that time period, probably as far as the direction Earth was going towards, that was probably true during that time. But we've since circumvented a lot of those timelines to where we're not going to see an apocalyptic timeline. I honestly believe that. I believe we've circumvented that timeline.
Yeah.
So we're going to see, a much different outcome than maybe some of these previous, prophets, or foreseers, that we're talking about. It's not that things are going to be all hunky dory, I mean, there's going to be some tough times. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
going to,
You
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 know,
speak you speak about those tough times, or you mentioned as well in your awakening that you have a few years of, you know, confronting and crying, but also in some of the interviews that you say that physically was challenging as well. Like
oh
obviously to
yeah, I
have
went
all that
through,
energy. So many of
yeah.
us, including myself, I think, and many of my clients are going through that physical challenges of when you're awake. How can you overcome, or what advice do you say, like to overcome all this within the 3D world, but at the same time connecting to higher frequencies? How can you
Yeah,
navigate?
that's a good question. Yeah, I definitely went through a health transformation. I mean, and even after my awakening, I went through I mean, like serious health condition after another. I mean, I was diagnosed with cancer in
Oh,
2016. Yeah, so I had to overcome that. And I did it without allopathic medicine help, so I didn't do
Hmm.
chemotherapy or radiation. So I did it holistically, mostly holistically, but
Wonderful. Wow.
yeah, so I've been in remission now since 2016,
That's a
but
big, big,
yeah,
you know,
it's a big thing to
task.
overcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they give you all that information at the same time you come with all these burdens, yeah, your body or
Yeah, yeah, because I think we're all kind of going through these upgrades and adjustments,
Mhm,
so and I think part of it is even purposeful on our soul part. Like if I can heal myself of these, you know, really serious illnesses, then I can help others, on their path, So, because I see it over and over again with starseeds. I think some of it is because we're, transitioning and changing and, we're taking on a lot of energetic changes. But some of it might even be genetic because a lot of us that are starseeds, our soul genetics don't come from this planet. So,
mhm,
we're not well suited for being in the third dimension, so we have to kind of go through this transition of working out all this stuff from our bodies, and it can be a lot. I mean, I do quite a few akashic clearings for people that are dealing with really serious health conditions, and it's kind of like a journey, and I kind of tell them, I can help you on your journey. I can help you facilitate through that journey, but I cannot heal you. You have
mhm.
to actually heal yourself. You know,
Yeah,
you you're going to be your own savior, in this case. I can only help you align with higher frequencies or shift your the intentions in your akashic records, maybe erase some of the old, karmic connections you might have with certain contracts or certain conditions, but the majority of the healing will have to come from yourself, and that was the case with me. I did most of my healing on my own, It
yeah,
was just like, I mean, I did get, allopathic medicine help. I did get, holistic help. I did a lot of Reiki and detoxing and,
yeah.
all the things that we all do, but,
In the
change my
physical, yeah,
diet, all that stuff. But a lot of it's energetic,
of
a
course.
lot of it is doing the shadow work. And I know in QHHT, you guys delve deep into the
Yeah.
shadow work. Yeah, you
It,
do.
it is, there are intense sessions and that happens. It's why I'm surprised. Like I admire your work because after a QH, I do once a day, like one a day, because
Yeah,
I truly, and just a few a week because the energy that for the client and also for myself is so
yeah.
like it's intense. Yeah, are intense
Oh,
sessions.
it is. It's that way for with Akashic readings too. That's why I can only do one reading a day. I used to
They,
do like 3 or 4 a day, and I was like, what was I thinking? I was like,
yeah.
no wonder I
So
was getting sick,
sick,
I mean,
yes, exactly. So
yeah,
how?
I was like, God, I was like, I need to stop doing that, So people get mad at me because they have to wait years to get on my calendar, but I got to take care of myself, and I still do one-on-ones, I still do them,
Okay,
but I have a very, very lengthy, I would say extremely lengthy waiting
waiting
list.
list.
Yeah, yeah.
So how
So
can to share to my followers and to the community, how can they contact you apart from watching all the videos that you have available and all the wisdom that you have out there? Do you have any upcoming workshops or any information that they
oh
actually,
yeah,
apart from the 101, if they want to wait? Akashic
yeah.
reading, anything else that they can get more information about
Oh,
you?
absolutely. Yeah.
And what do you, how would you guide them? That is the best way to contact you without waiting so long.
I would say going to my website. If they're
Mhm,
interested in what events I'll be involved with, that is on my website under the events. I think they have to go under offerings and then you'll see
mhm.
events and I also have trainings, so I have different trainings that people can just pay and watch. They're inexpensive. They're like $55, $66. So I have lots of different little trainings that were, past webinars that we did.
Yeah.
So, if somebody wants to, take a class on, say, Starseeds in health, which, since we just talked about health, I do have a 2-hour training on that, that they
Oh,
can take.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
wonderful.
it's kind of like a pay per play, like you just pay Kajabi, and then you have access to the video and you can watch the video.
Mhm.
And then you have a Kajabi account so you can watch the video anytime, so once you purchase it. So I have little trainings like that. We do webinars periodically, just,
Mhm.
through, my thing, but I also offer, workshops, periodic workshops. I would say this, I am doing an online thing, like little online presentation with Conscious Awakening Network. So that's going to be in June. Uh, Another thing I'm going to be involved with is I'm doing this through with Den Meditation in Los Angeles. So I'm doing an actual in-person, uh, this is going to be like a Akashic deep dive, Galactic History deep dive. It's a 1-day workshop at the beautiful London WeHo Hotel in
Oh,
Los
wow.
Angeles in West Hollywood. I mean, it's beautiful.
It's a-
Yeah, so that's an opportunity where people can get some really good training, and be able to train with me like in person,
yeah.
so um yeah, the other thing I'll be involved with is the Cosmic Awakening conference in Sedona. That's going to be, so the one that I just
Wonderful.
talked about in Los Angeles, that's going to be the beginning of August. Sedona is going to be the end of August. And then I'm doing a conference in Chichen Itza, Mexico. So yeah, I'm going to actually be in Mexico
That's good.
with the Mayans,
With the
so I'll be
Mayans.
doing that with some really amazing people like Tim Tactics and Ishmael Perez.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, so I'm going to be
Okay.
doing a nice little conference, just a handful of us, in Oaxaca, Mexico, and that's going to be in December, like right before Christmas. So
Okay.
yeah, so
So,
if people want to, be a part of that, they'll need to go on Tim Tactic's website,
okay.
and look up the conference. And if you guys can sign up my name under there, you'll get a special gift from me. So
Oh,
yeah,
oh,
so there's some opportunities to connect with me in person. I'm not doing as many in-person conferences this year. Got a little burned out from them last year, so I'm doing more online things. So I have
mhm.
other online events that people can get involved with, such as Portal to Ascension, and then I'm doing an online thing with Amy Robeson in July. So there's a lot of events that people can get involved with, and I'm also on social media. So if they want to just
Fantastic.
watch a video short, they can do that on Instagram, or if they want to watch longer videos, I have some on YouTube. So there's many ways people can connect, but I would say, just to get into the know, definitely, connect with me on my website.
So,
That's debbiesolaris.com.
sounds great. Oh, thank you, Debbie. Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time
Thank you
and
for having me on.
all the
Yeah.
information. You are one of the people that we can talk for hours, but I appreciate your your time and your
No, I
knowledge.
appreciate you having me on, and I'd love to hear more about your work sometimes. I'm sure you've had some interesting things that you ran across as well, but that
Yeah,
Mayan princess thing sounds really cool. So
yeah. I will
yeah,
send you the book. But the interesting, yes, they come in all these beings. What is fascinating me is that they come with the least person that he doesn't know anything about extraterrestrials.
yeah, yeah.
And they
It's
like the
always
more
the case.
pure mind, and there's
Yeah,
like a
exactly.
full-on knowledge of wow, like it's
And
fascinating.
people always ask me, like, why did they contact you? And I said, I don't know. There's nothing special about me. I mean, I was just a 3D human just trying to
I
pay my
the
bills and, not stay out of trouble, So yes.
the purity, I think, is that
Yeah, I think
purity
it's more the,
soul.
and I think the other thing too is they want to see that you're willing to be of service, so before I had my ET contact, I was working. I did a lot of volunteer work, working as part of an animal assisted therapy team. So I had a therapy animal, and she and I would visit a lot of people. I mean, we did a lot of programs for 6 years, including the American Red Cross, so we were quite involved, doing a lot of volunteer work. And I think they want to see, the extraterrestrial, they want to see that you're willing to be of service, that you really have this pure heart, that you really want to help people. So I would say those are the two things, the pureness of mind and also the pureness of heart. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up because that is so important.
It is. Thank you so much again. And I will put your contact details here for everybody. And you can contact Debbie if you want to get a more deep dive into these beings. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Take care. All
Thank
right.
you.